Hi there, and welcome to a special edition of the Studyclix Podcast. We've teamed up with an expert teacher, Peter Tobin, to bring you a limited podcast series all about Othello, the play by William Shakespeare.
Peter has recorded a series of podcasts for us where he goes into the specific aspects of what you need to know about Othello when you're studying it for the Leaving Cert. He covers everything from characters and different themes in the play to understanding Shakespeare's writing techniques and tips on approaching exam questions.
This is the first podcast in this series, so to kick us off, we're going to hear Peter talk about Othello and his characters. First, he'll give an overview of the syllabus and he'll move on to the characters in the play, both the main and minor, before wrapping it up with his thoughts on how best to answer a Leaving Cert question on Othello.
So, the next voice that you'll hear is Peter's. Enjoy listening.
Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Peter. I'm going to talk you through what the Leaving Cert syllabus and the Chief Examiner's Report for English says about how you should approach the Othello question in your Leaving Cert exam. Now there are three things in particular that the syllabus says students need to be able to do in Leaving Cert English that will apply to your answer on Othello. The first is to be able to understand the language of narration, and what that means is that you can read and understand a story or a text and be able to develop an awareness of your own response to it and then justify why you feel that way. The second is to be able to use the language of argument, and that means to be able to put forward a theory or a hypothesis and then justify it. And the third is all about the aesthetic use of language. Simply put, you should develop appropriate stances for reading in all literary genres. Now this means that students should approach drama scripts, like Othello, from a theatrical perspective, understanding that it's a play and it's been written to be performed. Now these three things contribute to what we call critical literacy, making interpretations and formulating ideas about a text, and this is something that the Chief Examiner's Report for English in particular talks an awful lot about. So the basic idea here is that you will be rewarded in your exam for coming up with original and interesting interpretations of the text and different and unique ideas about the characters. So what does all this mean, and how do we show these skills in our work? Well, when we look at characters in plays, we need to be able to understand that they are not real people. When we approach these characters as constructed characters, things that have been created by an author, then we see that they have to serve a dramatic purpose. And once we start looking at the characters like that, then we start to engage in critical literacy. Now, for example, what is the purpose of the character of Rodrigo in Othello? Well, Shakespeare's created him and put him in the play, but why? He has so few lines, he doesn't really do anything of note, but he's there in Act 1 and he's there just before the final scenes in Act 5. What is Rodrigo's dramatic purpose? Once we start answering this question, then we begin to go beyond the simple and basic interpretations of the play and the characters, and we start to become critically literate, because we're analysing the play as a piece of theatre then, and we're becoming aware of our own response to the play, and we're putting forward our own opinion or theory about what we think Shakespeare's trying to do. In Rodrigo's case, by the way, he's there to highlight traits in other characters, so he's useful, he serves a function. Now, it's also worth reminding ourselves as well about how this is going to be marked by an examiner. The examiners use the PCLM system of marking, where P stands for purpose, C for clarity, L for language, and M for mechanics. Now, if you take a question on the single text marked out as 60, then it will be 18 each for P, C, and L, and 6 for M. But it's interesting to note that whatever you get out of 18 for P, you can't get any higher out of 18 for C or L. So P then is the most important part to get right. And what is it? Well, purpose is the focus or relevance of your response to the question. It's using well-chosen or compelling points to support your argument. It's originality of thought. It's an understanding of dramatic events. And it's evidence of critical literacy. We can see then that if your argument or interpretation is basic, your marks will be limited. What you've got to do for that H1 is to understand the characters on a dramatic level and develop your opinions on them and what Shakespeare is trying to do with them.
What you just heard was a general overview of Othello and how the Leaving Cert syllabus expects students to approach it. The next thing Peter's going to talk about is an overview of the characters in the play. This will be a brief introduction to who's who in the play and how the characters link to each other.
In the exam, there is generally a choice between a thematic question and a character-based one, so it's important to focus on the characters in detail as well as the play itself. Let's begin with the title character, Othello. He's referred to in the play often as the Moor, and that's a reference to the fact that he's not Venetian, like the rest of the characters. Not only is he not from Venice though, but he's also not white like the rest of the characters. Othello is an outsider, and he's tolerated in Venetian society because he's a great general and has helped the Venetian state to victories in battle, but being black, he is only tolerated for his ability on the battlefield. When he marries Desdemona, the true colours of the Venetian nobility are revealed through their attitude to his marriage to one of their own. Desdemona is the daughter of a Venetian nobleman called Brabantio, and she falls in love with Othello during his many visits to see her father. She tells the Duke that she fell in love with Othello because of his stories, the ones he would tell at her father's house when he would visit. They began their relationship and marry in total secrecy, and Desdemona is often portrayed as true and honest and good, and can be seen as representing the idea of the perfect woman. Ultimately, however, it's not enough to save her life. Iago is a senior military man in Othello's army, but he's not chosen as Othello's lieutenant. Instead, that honour goes to another character called Cassio. While Iago is someone who has actual experience of battle and has fought alongside Othello for many years, Cassio, according to Iago, has no experience of the battlefield, and what he knows about battle he has learned from books. So to Iago, this is a terrible decision that Othello has made, and he cannot forgive him, so he makes it his mission to destroy both Cassio and Othello. Cassio is good-looking, honest, noble, truthful, all things that we can say that Iago is not. In many ways, while they're rivals for the same position, they are opposites of each other. It's interesting that Othello chooses Cassio as his lieutenant, despite Iago's supposed superior experience on the battlefield. What is Shakespeare trying to tell us there? While Iago says that Cassio's promotion is the reason for his plotting, he also makes reference to rumours that Othello, and even Cassio as well, have had affairs with his wife. In contrast to Cassio's easy charm and self-assurance, Iago is paranoid and insecure. Emilia is Iago's wife and Desdemona's servant, a sort of lady-in-waiting or handmaid. She is presented in contrast to Desdemona as well. Where Desdemona is good and virtuous, Emilia is plain-speaking and ordinary. When Desdemona says she would not cheat on her husband, even to make him a king, Emilia is much more pragmatic and says she would do it because once he was king, he could remove the offence. Despite how she comes across as simple and ordinary, even at times a bit morally loose, she is the one character who figures out Iago's deception at the end. Bianca is a prostitute, and while Desdemona represents the pinnacle of virtue, Bianca represents the lower end. She is primarily involved with Cassio in the latter stages of the play, and, like Roderigo, is used by Shakespeare as a plot device. Roderigo is a Venetian who is in love with Desdemona, and Iago takes advantage of him, taking his money and mixing him up in his plots. He is a limited character who is used to show off Iago's skills and advance the plot more than anything else. There are other Venetian noblemen, dukes and governors that come on and off stage at various points, but these are the main characters you need to know because they are the main characters that Shakespeare develops throughout the play.
Moving on, Peter's going to take a look at some of the minor characters in the play and look in particular at their dramatic function, what Shakespeare wanted them to represent, or what he wanted to use them for.
So the first character that we're going to look at is Cassio. While he's an important character, we don't actually find out a huge amount about Cassio, but the small bits of information that we do get allow us to form a fairly clear picture of him. Cassio is a Florentine, and remember, Iago's main objection to Othello choosing Cassio as his lieutenant is that he hasn't got experience of battle, at least in the field, like Iago does. Iago accuses him of being an arithmetician, somebody who's a mathematician, and having learned what he knows of battle from books. Now, this isn't entirely accurate. As someone who would have been raised and educated in Florence, Cassio would actually have been highly prized as both a soldier and as a gentleman. So Iago's remarks here reflect more on his own jealousies than any shortcomings of Cassio, and we can see why Othello would have wanted him to be his lieutenant. It's also indicated to us that he's got a long-established relationship with Othello, and there must be a great deal of shared experience there. So Cassio's nobility, his easy charm, all of these serve to highlight Iago's insecurity and his ugliness, both physically and metaphorically, as well as all this misplaced jealousy. The next character, Brabantio, Desdemona's father, is even less fleshed out. All we know about Brabantio is that he has been betrayed by his daughter as she has married in secret without his permission. This betrayal, though, is important because it raises two questions. If Desdemona has betrayed her father, what's to stop her betraying her husband? And the second, if she was willing to go against her father in that way, what does it say about her character? So Brabantio's dramatic purpose, then, is to symbolise betrayal and the fact that it happened once, it could happen again, raising suspicions about the otherwise perfect Desdemona. Finally, we've got Rodrigo. Rodrigo is in love with Desdemona, he has money, and he's a fool. It would be tempting to see Rodrigo as just a plot device, simply a way to show how clever Iago is and to advance the plot at certain points in the play. But he also serves a more important purpose. Rodrigo is the counter-argument to those who argue that it's Othello's own fault that he was so taken in and influenced by Iago, that it's his own foolishness that leads him to tragedy. But Iago is able to manipulate a Venetian, Rodrigo, in the exact same way, so he's clearly a skilled manipulator. Each of these characters serves a clear purpose for Shakespeare, and it's important that you can identify and give examples like these if you're writing about any or all of them. In order to show your awareness of genre, that this is a play, you need to be able to discuss Shakespeare's choices as well as a playwright, what he uses these minor characters to do, for example. This is the key to being critically literate, and that's really going to help in securing your H1.
And finally, to wrap it up for this episode, Peter will take a look at how best to answer Leaving Cert questions that come up on the characters in Othello.
Now, the first thing you should do upon reading your question is to inspect it and work out what it is that question is asking you to do. It's vital that you answer the question asked, because lots of marks depend on this in the P or purpose part of the PCLM mark scheme that your examiner will use. So the question could be a statement or a question inviting you to agree or disagree or to discuss. Now, regardless of how it's phrased, you need to narrow down exactly what it is that you're being asked. If it helps, you can rephrase it for yourself to give yourself more focus on what that central aspect of the question is. Again, regardless of what the question asks, equally important is that you respond to the question in the correct way. And we're going to look at 3 elements that you need to make sure that you include as part of any essay response. So the first one is your understanding of the play as a piece of theatre and characters as serving purposes. Now, this sounds simple. Othello was a play, Shakespeare was a playwright, but it's often forgotten when students actually get into an exam hall. To show your awareness of this when it comes to questions on character, you must make reference to Shakespeare's intentions, what he wanted to use the different characters for. A good way of thinking about this when you're revising is to pick a character and then ask yourself what would happen if they were removed from the play. This will inevitably lead you to see the character as a function of the play as a whole. Take a seemingly minor character like Bianca or Rodrigo, for example. Although they don't have many lines, their characters aren't ever developed, they do serve a function. Being aware of this shows your examiner that you understand the play as a piece of theatre. For all the characters in the play, you should be able to make reference to how they interact with the other characters, what happens when they are on and off stage, how they are presented to the audience, how they behave. What does Shakespeare do when he is introducing the characters on stage? Do they arrive at particular points? Now, the next thing that it is crucial to show evidence of is your critical literacy. To do this in a character question, you must be able to offer alternative interpretations of characters and ones that are sophisticated enough to be different to the ordinary, everyday ones that the examiners will be reading lots of. For example, Iago is not simply evil, Desdemona is not all good and pure, Othello isn't just a noble soldier. Holding these characters up to the light and being critical in your interpretations, being able to offer evidence in support of your opinions, will all help you towards getting those top grades. You should have surface and deeper interpretations for each character in the play, and also be able to support those with reference to the context that Shakespeare is writing in. For example, how we view Desdemona today in the 21st century is very different to how she might have been viewed in the 17th century. It's important to be both aware of these differences and be able to point to examples to support your ideas. Again, with the idea of showing your examiner that you know the text and you know the background. And that brings us to our final one. Know the text. Remember that how we interpret characters depends on what they say as well as how they interact with other characters. So it's really important to have a bank of key quotations to use to support your interpretations of the different characters. You don't need to learn the play off by heart, but having a few well-chosen quotes for each character will bring any essay to life.
That wraps it up for this first episode in our Othello podcast series. We hope this helped provide a good general overview of the play, as well as a good insight into the characters and how to answer a question that may come up on them on the Leaving Cert.
Keep listening to this series for more analysis on the play Othello. It'll help you gain a better understanding of the play and will equip you with the knowledge on how to approach a Leaving Cert question based on this play by William Shakespeare.
Thank you for listening so far, and as always, if you want to get in touch to leave any feedback, questions or comments you might have for us, you can contact us by email at info@studyclix.ie. You can also chat to us directly on the Studyclix website via the chat box in the bottom right hand corner.
Yes, and as always, don't forget to subscribe to the Studyclix podcast wherever you listen to podcasts so you can stay up to date with our latest episodes. If you want to support us, we'd love it if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or tell a friend about us so we can help as many students as possible.
And don't forget to follow Studyclix on social media if you're not already. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram and TikTok. We're always posting lots of fun stuff, lots of useful study tips and regular competitions, so it's well worth giving us a follow. And of course, a big thank you to Peter Tobin for working with us on this, for bringing his expert advice on the play Othello for Leaving Cert students. We hope you stay tuned for more.